Hey, Vlad here, devinsideyou.com. Welcome to another video. Are you someone who doesn't have the time or the patience to figure out all the bells and whistles of WSL? If you are, I'm glad you're here, because I've done all of that for you. Let's get right to it. If you're new here, you should probably know that this is mostly a Scala channel. However, if you check out the About section, you will see that it's all about professional software development, which is the reason why I don't make videos about Scala alone. The key takeaway here is the professional part. I consider myself a professional software developer, and because of this, I haven't touched WSL with a 10-foot pole for a very, very long time. Seriously, I'm making this video in September of 2020. Hashtag best year ever. Long after all the hype for WSL settled down, long after WSL 2 has been released, and also long after all the other content creators created their content. Why? Because I'm not interested in playing with toys. I need it to be production ready. I need it to be my daily driver. And so I waited and read the blogs and watched the videos, and even though it finally seemed ready, I still had millions of questions. And so I put together this one-stop mini-series for you, and here's the plan. There will be two videos. In this one, I'm simply going to show you my setup. We're going to talk about WSL, about what it is and about what it's not, and about all the issues that I had setting it up. And in the next video, I'm going to show you step by step how I did it. So the first video is the what, and the next video is the how. Now, I kind of assume that you're someone like me who already watched a couple of tutorials or maybe, seen a couple of videos and, you still had a couple of questions. So even though I'm going to explain what WSL is, we're not going to start there. For now, you should at least know that WSL is a way for you to run Linux inside of Windows. That's like the only prerequisite. And so before we dive into WSL, allow me to explain what I want it to be, or in fact, what I need it to be. I've been a Windows user since I started using computers, not because I love it or anything like that. It's simply for historical reasons. In fact, I wish that I could switch to Linux full-time. However, there are still a couple of things that are holding me back. In any case, even though I'm on Windows since around 2013, anything remotely related to software development, I was running inside of Oracle's VirtualBox, and that includes my professional work. To this day, I don't even have Git installed on Windows. So I have been a very, very happy user of Oracle's VirtualBox since around 2013, even though it was a little bit slower than a native Linux installation. However, trust me when I say this, it was good enough for my full-time job. In fact, with the exception of the previous couple of videos, I have been running a Linux VM in pretty much all of the other ones. And so what I want WSL to be is a better VirtualBox, even though it was absolutely not designed to compete with it, which is also why many things are extremely painful to set up, which is also one of the reasons why I'm making this video, so that you don't have to go through the pain that I went through. I wrote down a couple of wishes that I have for WSL. Allow me to read them to you. First one, I want it to start quicker than the VirtualBox, which it does. Second one, I want it to be smaller in size, which it is. The third one, I want it to consume less resources, which it does. Number four, I want it to be able to run multiple instances of the same distribution, which it does, but not out of the box. The fifth one, I want port forwarding to be as easy as in VirtualBox, and it is. In fact, it's even easier. All ports are forwarded automatically. Number six, I want backups to be easy, and they are. Seven, I want the backup and restore process to be fast, which it is. Eight, I want to use WSL for any Linux distribution I want, which in theory is possible, but practically speaking, I will probably never find the time to figure out how to package the distributions which are not available on the Windows Store. Number nine, I want it to be stable, which it is for the most part, but honestly, Microsoft has dropped the ball on the updates so many times that it's just a matter of time until they break WSL. And 10, since I'm using it for work and not just as a toy, I need the ability to go back to VirtualBox if I desire to do so, which is mostly possible, but there is a huge caveat to that. Please notice that I didn't mention speed. I don't care if it's faster than VirtualBox, which it is, by the way, but honestly, for my needs, VirtualBox was fast enough. Alright, so before I show you my setup, I would like to mention that I'm pretty happy with it. It doesn't do all the things that I would want it to do, but for now, it's good enough for my needs. In fact, I've been using it in production, for my full-time job in the last couple of months, and I didn't encounter any showstoppers. At no time did I wish to go back to VirtualBox. Let's begin the tour by simply opening the VirtualBox. So at all points in time, I have at least 3 virtual machines. This first one I use for my full-time job. This is the one that I usually use when I record my videos. And this is simply a workspace. It's not an outer space, right? So I use this machine to prepare my videos. They're all running on Ubuntu 18.04, even though 20.04 is already out. And in fact, my WSL instances, they already run 20.04. I simply didn't bother to to update. Now, I know that Ubuntu is being frowned upon in the Linux circles, but honestly, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. I've been using it since 2013. Even though I don't have a particular reason to use it, I also don't have a particular reason to stop using it. It just works. Now, if we switch to my other virtual desktop, I already opened a couple of directories for you. So this is a directory with my 3 VMs, and if you look at the size of them, you're going to see that it's around like 350 gigs. And the issue here is that most virtualization solutions, similar to databases, they never give up the free space even if they don't need it. So if you take like a large file, let's say a video file like 15 gigs, you copy it over into one of the machines, then even if you remove the file, they're not going to give up the free space. And WSL, well, technically WSL2 suffers from a similar issue. There are external tools though that allow you to shrink the virtual drive back. This over here are my backups. They have a similar size. They're a bit smaller because I exported them a long time ago. And I have a similar setup for my WSLs. They're much smaller. Well, they're also kind of like new. I've been using them only for a couple of months. So it's 21 gigs, and the backups are only 18 gigs. By the way, the virtual drives for WSL, well, technically WSL2, because in WSL1 they're not virtualized, and we're going to talk about it in just a second, but they're limited to 256 gigs, and I'm going to leave a link down in the description with instructions of how to resize it, but I've never tried it, so there might be dragons. Now, before we dive into one of my instances, I believe it's a good time to talk about WSL in general. The initial marketing term for WSL was Bash on Windows, and it was released in the summer of 2016. The idea was simple. Windows shell sucks. Let's give people Bash, which is the default shell on the Linux distributions, and it has been around for over 30 years. Later, the project was renamed to Windows Subsystem for Linux, but honestly, it still smells like just a shell. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, WSL was not designed to replace full-blown virtualization solutions like the VirtualBox. So running multiple instances of the same distribution, or specifying the initial disk size, or even renaming them, or even deciding where to install them, those features are just not available. And they're just workarounds and hacks, and some of them I'm going to show you in the next video. It was supposed to be just a shell. In fact, one of the cool features about it is that you could pipe things from PowerShell to Bash, or the other way around, from Bash to PowerShell, as we will see later in this video. The primary target audience for this were us, the developers, and we wanted more. Firstly, I/O was slow, too slow. And secondly, WSL1 translates the Linux system calls to Windows system calls. And so it doesn't run an actual Linux kernel, which means that we can't just assume that any Linux application would for sure run inside of WSL1, which was a big deal because Docker became popular and you couldn't run Docker inside of WSL1. In 2019, Microsoft announced a full-blown redesign of WSL, and they called it WSL2. And WSL2 feels more like an actual virtual machine. Virtual machines run on a thing called the hypervisor, and WSL2 runs on a subset of Microsoft's Hyper-V hypervisor. WSL2 now runs a full-blown Linux kernel, which was a big deal, as I already mentioned, since now we could run Docker. And also the file system is virtualized. There's a virtual hard drive, and the file system is ext4. And you can still access the virtual drive through a network driver. In fact, let me show you this real quick. If I go to another workspace, this one, we can actually close this guy. Okay, so if I press Windows R, which allows me to run commands, then I can just do \\WSL and then the dollar or the money symbol. Then I will arrive in my network. Now, because all of my instances are now closed, in fact, let me actually run one of them. For example, I'm going to run DIY, and I'm going to explain you what I just did. So in in a couple of minutes, but for now, let me just run it real quick like this. This is just a Windows terminal. Let me minimize it, and it should appear here. There we go. Refresh. This is the dev inside your virtual machine. So I go in there, and there's my home folder, Vlad, and was a typical Linux stuff in there. The I/O operations in WSL2 are much faster now. However, if you need to interact with the Windows file system a lot, then WSL1 still might be faster. And the good news is that you can run both of them at the same time. However, you can't say the same for the VirtualBox. See, the problem with the hypervisors is that you cannot run multiple of them. Okay, and if I open the Oracle VirtualBox again, if I click on one of these settings, Well, in fact, you see it over here, okay? So it says the acceleration is the Hyper-V part of virtualization, okay? So if you go over here, I believe under System and then Acceleration, the default hypervisor that the Oracle VirtualBox is using is the KVM hypervisor. I believe, I'm actually not 100% sure about it, but I believe it's the KVM. And the thing is that because we need Hyper-V to run WSL, we're forced to switch it to Hyper-V as well, which is what I did. And even though it technically works since the VirtualBox version 6 something, so I'm running 6.1.14 or something, okay? So it technically works, it's gonna boot up, but it's so slow that it basically became unusable. So there's still a way to sort of like go back to VirtualBox. Remember, this was one of my requirements. However, it would basically mean to disable the WSL, for a moment, and then reboot the machine, use your VirtualBox for a bit, and and then once you're done, reboot back, re-enable the flags and so on. It's a bit painful, but at least it's possible. By the way, Hyper-V is a Windows Pro feature. However, there is a way to run it on the Windows Home Edition, and I'll show you how to do it in the next video. I haven't tested it though, since I'm running the Pro Edition. Another thing that you should probably know is that WSL only works on a 64-bit version of Windows, which should be most of them these days, but you never know. Now, I don't see myself switching to WSL1 or going back to Oracle VirtualBox anytime soon. It's WSL2 is good enough for my needs. However, your mileage may vary, and also the feature parity is not really there. Okay, for example, WSL2 doesn't support IPv6, or running GUI applications is not that straightforward. It's possible, and I'm going to show it to you in this video, and also how to set it up in the next video. But still, in any case, Microsoft is working on improving all of these features, and hopefully one day the feature parity is going to be there. All right, so these were the basics. So now we can jump into one of my instances and play around with it a little bit. And for this, we need a terminal. And I played around with like 6 different terminals and ended up using the Windows terminal, not the default built-in one, but the new and shiny one that you can get from the Microsoft Store. And I'll show you how to do it in the next video. Now, what happened a couple of seconds ago was that I pressed Windows R and I pressed DIY. Well, I typed in DIY, okay? And what happens here is that I have a folder on my path. If I type in path, this is not going to happen for you. This is, this is something that I did. Let me actually show you. So if I show my desktop icons and I go into properties and I go into advanced system settings and environment variables, and we're going to find, okay, so these are mine. These are the system ones. I'm not sure which one I changed. Probably this one. Okay, if I go to edit, then you're going to see that one of the folders that I have is this one, dptsync agilenet util path common. So this is the one that I opened over here, right? So this is common one, and this folder just contains a bunch of shortcuts. For example, see this one fz. So if I just type it in fz, then FileZilla is going to open. Okay, so this is usually what I do. And so a couple of them that I have here is this one, for example, DIY. And what it does is it simply launches the Windows terminal, and it basically tells it to fill one of the panes with one of my instances. In this particular case, it's the dev inside you instance. All right, so let me close all of that. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Cancel. So we already did this a couple of seconds ago because I wanted to show you the network drive, and as you have seen, it launched in full screen. So let me actually bring it back. And by the way, one of the cool things about Windows Terminal is that it has this built-in arrow over here, and you can click on it and it will show you all of the WSL instances over here, and it will show you your PowerShell and command and whatever. So for example, if I click on space, it will just open it in a different tab. Okay. So similarly to what happened over here was that, well, I'm using ZSH and all my ZSH was updated, and also I'm using keychain, which allows me to cache my SSH key, which is why every time I log in, it just asks me to enter my passphrase, which is what I'm going to do over here. And then it's going to be cached for the entire length of the session. And by the way, if I close this, it doesn't mean that the WSL instance was actually closed. It is still running in the background. So if I open it again, this one, it will not ask me for my SSH key. Let me actually run it in full screen real quick. All right, so what you see over here is Biobu, and I already have a video about Biobu. If you're interested, it's simply a wrapper for things like either Tmux or Screen. By default, it's Tmux, which is a screen. No, I'm sorry, it's a terminal multiplexer. All right. Um, Curiously enough, this is still probably like one of the very few issues that I haven't figured out in WSL. For some reason, in Windows Terminal, and in fact in most other terminals that I have tried, when it runs together with Biobu or Tmux, if you see my ZSH, it has actually a prompt which contains an empty line, okay? And sometimes it has like some sort of a weird race condition that the empty line is not rendered. However, it only happens inside of Tmux or inside of Biobu. I'm gonna keep saying Biobu from now on. And Biobu has has a shortcut for simply like refreshing the screen, and so it doesn't bother me that much. It's still a bit annoying, but at least I can press F5 and then it's gonna be refreshed. I'm sure that we're gonna encounter this this issue later today. Also, another issue is that if I run Vim, for example, I have an alias vimc that will simply open my Vim configuration. Notice that my cursor is a pipe over here, and it's configured in the Windows terminal. And if I go into Vim, which is in this particular case, this is a new Vim. And then it changes the cursor because we're in the normal mode. If I press I, then we're going to be in the insert mode, and it changes the cursor again. I press escape, we're going to be in the normal mode again. Now, if I exit Vim for some reason, it's going to keep this cursor, right? So it's going to forget that my setting was actually just a pipe. It's a bit annoying, and in a regular Vim, there is a different issue. It's simply not gonna change the cursor at all, right? So it's gonna stay the pipe in the in the regular mode, in the normal mode, or in the insert mode. Okay, a bit annoying. Like usually when this happens, I just press Control D, and because it's already opened over here, let me actually keep all of them in the same Windows Terminal instance. Okay, I basically just reopen it and then I have my pipe back. It's a bit annoying. Like usually, like in most cases, it doesn't bother me much, and then I let it stay. And hopefully it's going to be fixed in the future. All right, so let me run lsb release. Okay, so that you can see that this is Ubuntu 20.04, and this brings me already to one of the first issues that this is the minimal version of Ubuntu, which unfortunately you cannot see from this output, but this is the minimal version. It's the one that you would use if you would run it inside of Docker, inside of a continuous integration server, for example. And as a minimal version, it doesn't have like all the bells and whistles. For example, I had to manually go and install a keychain and configure it so that it would cache my SSH key. So if I were to run, for example, htop, you're going to see that it actually uses all of my CPU cores. I have DirectX diagnostics. I have 6 cores, and 6 of them are virtualized over here. Well, it says 12 CPUs, okay, but I'm running in i7, whatever. Bought it like 1.5 years ago. I don't remember. In any case, so these are not like some virtualized cores. These are like the real cores. And if I go into full screen, you will actually see that almost nothing is running over here, right? So this is what I wanted to show you, that this is like the minimal version. There's like nothing over here. Another thing that you need to know is that by default it runs 80% of your it can occupy only 80% of your RAM. I have 64 gigs, and 50 gigs seems to be around 80%, I think. All right, let's close this one. I'm just pointing this out simply because since this is a minimal version, you're constantly gonna run into some issues that some parity issues that was a full-blown version. For example, I have Docker installed, but there is no systemd support. There are hacks around to enable it, but basically there's no systemd support, and so sometimes you need to not forget to start Docker, right? Say, hey, I cannot connect to the Docker daemon, so you just do the regular sudo service docker start. All right, and now it's actually running, so now it's actually all good. Another thing, for example, is that if you do like hostname, you're gonna see that it's using the name of my Windows machine, which is Agile Nomad, because I'm traveling. And over here you see space though, right? So the way it works is that I simply configured my prompt to show whatever I want, and I'm going to show you how to do this in the next video. However, in typical Linux, you would just be able to go and change your host name, right? Or you would be able to go into etc host over here and change stuff over here. However, every time you do this, like the next time you boot, WSL is simply going to regenerate this file and your host name. So basically, what I'm saying is that you cannot change your host name. Okay, it's one of those annoying things. Also, like similar to all the other virtual solutions, they all run under the same IP. So luckily you already see IP over here, but we can also do like the regular route. Like this is the IP. Where is it? I believe it's this one, right? Was it this one? 222.148. Yeah, it's this one. Where did it go? Where did it go? Hold on. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so it's exactly the same one over here. And so you're gonna run into some issues if you're, I don't know, developing some web server and you run it on port 8080, right? And then you go to another instance, you start like some other development server. If it's also on port 8080, it's simply not gonna start because it's gonna tell you that the port is occupied because they're running under the same IP. And I'm not a super, Linux expert. I've been using it for, 8 years or so, but I don't consider myself an expert. I Google around a little bit, and I believe that you can actually work around this a little bit. You can assign like an additional IP address or something, but I haven't played with it because so far I didn't need it. All right, so what you can also do is you can run some GUI apps. However, this requires some additional setup. In the future, WSL is going to support GUI apps, but for now you basically have two ways. The first one is that you install, the full-blown UI, for Ubuntu in this case, whichever you want, and then you would use some, remote connection tool, like and connect it over XRDP or something similar. It's so sort of like a team viewer, just connect it. And another one is the one that I went through is I went was an X server, right? So you install an X server on Windows, and then all of these become X clients, and they simply send GUI stuff, GUI requests back and forth between the server and the client. For example, I believe in this one I actually have Sublime Text installed. So if I just run it, as you can see, like X server started over here and it runs over here. It shows my home folder, and you can type, and it's all good. It seems a bit slower for some people. I haven't played around with it enough to actually tell you if it's actually slow or not, but it's supposed to be slower apparently. Also, like this is the issue that I was talking about. As you can see, it didn't like this empty line was supposed to be rendered over here, and so if I press F5, it's actually going to fix it for me. In fact, I tried like 6 different terminals on Windows, and they're all they all had weird issues and bugs. I had big hopes for Alacrity, but Alacrity actually has an issue. In fact, I can actually show it to you. So if I run Alacrity, okay, and I connect to well, it doesn't even, I don't even need to connect to anything to show you what I mean. What I mean is that if it's in full screen, then for some reason, whatever is in the back, it doesn't get focused. So for example, where is it? For example, this is the Windows terminal, right? So if I release it, it should have popped up. What's happening is that it's actually behind the scenes. It's actually in the background, and it's actually accepting, like I'm gonna type hello. So I typed in hello, okay, but I don't see the window, okay. So if I go out of the full screen and actually close Alacrity, PowerShell doesn't understand Control D. As you can see, I just tapped in hello. Okay, so this one issue, like with Alacrity, pretty much makes it unusable for me. And also, it doesn't support ligatures. This is one of the cool things about the Windows terminal. It actually supports ligatures. Maybe I can actually show it to you. So see, like this is, for example, like a fancy arrow. Maybe like this. It's gonna be an arrow. No, like that. Well, anyway, you see it over here. Another general thing that you should probably know about WSL is that the path is shared between, well, they're not shared, they're merged, right? So the path variable from Windows, it's actually the one that I showed you before. Well, actually, it's close to what I showed you before. So advanced system environment variables. This is mine. This one, right? So this variable is shared it's merged was the one from Windows. Okay, so if you do echo $path, you're gonna see that you have like the regular user local sbin, user local bin, and whatever, and then the Windows path is also attached. And by the way, the Windows stuff, it is mounted under under /mnt, so you can go to mnt c, for example. Okay, this is my C drive, and the same for D. This is my D drive and so on. All right. So what I wanted to show you is that because the path is shared, you can actually run Windows apps, right? So if you do like Explorer, .exe, okay, and open it in the current folder, then it will actually go and remember it went to this, backslash backslash WSL dollar, went into space, went into MNT, and this is where we are. So this is where, CDE, these are my drives. This is where they are mounted, right? CDE, these are my drives. All right. And this is that thing that I meant in the beginning of the video, that you can pipe things to PowerShell and back. So for example, if I do something like echo dev inside you, and as you can see, I was playing around with it already in this VM. So if I pipe it to clip.exe, which is, the clipboard tool in Windows. So if I just do this and I open Notepad, for example, and I'll be able to simply paste it. You can also do it the other way around. So if I simply launch my Windows terminal, okay, then I do WSL list and verbose, then you're going to see that one of them, well, actually I don't see it here. Maybe it's just without the verbose thing. Yeah, so just without, just with the L, you see that one of them is marked as default, which means if I run, for example, dir, right? So which, runs, shows you my folders, like one of them, for example, is called videos. So what I can do is I can take dir and I can pipe it into WSL, and the instance that is marked as default is going to be used. So I can pipe it and I can do grab videos, for example, okay? And so it grabs the videos. It's a bit fiddly every time, you're playing around with it. So for example, I'm running, I have a Fuzzy Finder installed inside. So if I do something like this, WSL FZF, then it's going to say, that the command not found. And the issue is that for some reason it doesn't load my ZSHRC. However, there is still a way to get there, right? So you can do like, the full path in this particular case. And then bam, I'm running FZF over here. So I can do something like, videos. Okay, see, so for some reason now it doesn't accept my input. So as I already mentioned, it's a bit finicky. Maybe the issue is that I'm like in a folder, which is kind of weird. So let me switch to D, for example. Let me do it over here. Maybe I can do something like, maybe I can type over here. No, I cannot. It's a bit weird. Like when I was practicing for this video, let me actually go in here, for example. What do I have in there? So I have only 3 things. Let me actually try to run it over here. Okay, let me try. Somehow, like I don't know, somehow I actually managed to type, but as you can see, it's a bit finicky. It's a bit of, there's a bit of fiddling around. I said a couple of things about networking before. One of the things that I sort of forgot to mention is that IPv6 is not supported. Well, I actually mentioned it before, but one of the things that you need to know about this is that if you're running a Java server, something on the JVM, Scala, Clojure, whatever you have, Java, Kotlin, then for some reason the JVM it prefers the IPv6 stack, and so even though WSL sets up port forwarding for you, it's actually not going to work unless you explicitly ask the JVM to run it under IPv6. And I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna show you the flag like somewhere over here. Okay, I'm not super sure if we're gonna play with it in the next video or not. But the other regular port forwarding works out of the box. Let me actually close this one. So over here, where for example in space, then I could, for example, go into my website over here. This is the project from my website, and I could run the live server. No CSS inject. So as you can see, it just launched automatically. So it runs on 127.0.0.1, 8080. So it's all good. So this is my website. Okay. However, as already mentioned, like for Java, you would also need a special flag. Let me actually close this one. Let me kill the server over here. In fact, let me actually show you this this Java thing. So I believe that I should have a project over here. Let me just pull again. Like as you can see, like over here, I had like an empty line again. Man, come on, I want to have it in full screen. Right. So I pressed F5. Okay, it has some merge conflicts. What is it? Whatever, just ignore all of them. All right, so one of the things that you need to know is that if you run through Visual Studio Code, and Visual Studio Code sort of splits itself and runs the server, I'm going to show this to you in just a second, then you actually don't need to do this thing that I'm gonna show you in a second. Okay, so let me actually run Visual Studio Code, and so what is going to happen is that again, I have it installed on Windows, and because the path is merged, it simply started the Visual Studio Code that it runs on Windows. If you run it for the first time, it will actually suggest that you install the WSL remote extension, which is, hold on, where is it? WSL remote. My laptop is starting to overheat. It has nothing to do with WSL though. Okay, so it will suggest you install this extension, and this is exactly what is happening over here. At the bottom over here, you see that it's actually connected to the WSL instance, and also you see it over here. It's the Remote Explorer, so you don't even need to run the terminal. You can go and directly connect to one of them, right? So you can just open the folders that it opened before in a different machine, and we'll just close this one and open the other one. All right, so this is a simple to-do application that we wrote in the Techless Final series. If you haven't been following along, don't worry about it, but one of the versions of this to-do app can be delivered via an HTTP server. So this is also the one that we're going to run in just a second. So what I want to show you is that when you run a server through VS Code, you actually don't need to specify this extra flag. Like for some reason, VS Code is going to manage this for you. And yeah, also like the first time that you're going to start it, as you can see, by the way, it's kind of slow now. It's not because of WSL, it's because my laptop is overheating, and it's like 30 degrees outside. Okay, so let me switch to this one, for example, and let me actually run it. So it will run on 127.0.0.1.80.80, I believe, which is over here. Okay, so if I just alt click over here, then we're going to see that it's going to work in a sense that at least it loads. So over here we don't have any to-dos over here. However, if I were to start it without VS Code, which is what I'm going to show you over here, so I'm actually just going to kill it and close it, and close the entire thing over here. So if I go into space, and if I go just into SBT, and by the way, if you're not a Scala developer, SBT is just a build tool similar to Maven. It's just that it's interactive, so you just kind of go in there and you sit there all day. Okay, so let me start real quick. All right, so let's do the same trick, and let's start it. Let's wait a second for it to start. And there we go. Come on. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, it's still the same IP, but if I go over here and I reload the page, it should simply not be available because I simply don't have this IPv6 stack enabled. So if I go back over here and I kill it, and I actually include this the system property prefer IPv4 stack. So if I start it now, as you can see, it says I picked it up. By the way, notice the underscore over here. You can use the underscore Java options or the Java tool options. Okay, Java underscore tool underscore options, and then it's going to pick it up, and then it's going to prefer the IPv4 stack, and then it's going to work out. All right, the same trick, and run it, and there we go. It's running again. Like usually, it's even a bit faster. As already mentioned, I'm really having some thermal throttling issues. All right, so now it's running. I should reload the page, and it should work. Please work. I sometimes saw that it didn't work, but it actually should work. No, it does work. As you can see, ta-da! But again, if you're using VS Code, then everything should work out for you. All right, let me close this. Let me close that. Let me actually kill this one. We're pretty much at the end of the video. The only couple of things that I want to mention is that in Windows Terminal you have you have ligatures. Also you have like mouse support works fine. If I open this this whole thing with Vim, for example, and I don't know, I go into some file, mouse support works. Like I can drag things around. I can click on things. Again, like for some reason, as you can see, it jumps around a little bit. Yeah, like Windows Terminal has some rendering issues. Also, you have mouse support in Viobu. Alright, so if I do this and I do that and I do that and actually enable the support like this, then I will actually be able to drag things around. As you can see, my hyperthrottling issues, it takes forever to even start the shell. This has nothing to do with WSL. It's actually really fast. All right, let's close this, close Vim. It's importing the build. We actually don't care about this. All right, as you can see, this is one of the issues. In fact, Alacrity has this as well, that when you exit Vim, it doesn't it doesn't restore my original, pipe cursor. One last thing specifically for Scala developers, if you're using metals, with VS Code or something, then remember, because all of the instances, they all use the same IP, sometimes metals gets confused to which bloop to connect, if you have like the same project in those multiple instances as I do. For example, I prepare my videos in one, and then when I'm recording in another one, and so I'm having like exactly the same project, same name, same path, and everything, then sometimes it gets confused. All you need to do is restart the bloop server and the metals server. Okay, there's no need to re-import the build or to remove the .bloop or .metals directories or anything like that. All right, I believe that this is all that I wanted to show you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as already mentioned, in the next video, I'm going to show you step by step how to set all of this up. For now, as always, it's been Vlad, devinsideyou.com. Don't forget to like this video if you did, subscribe if you want to improve the developer inside you, and if you learned something today, consider support me on GitHub sponsors or Patreon, whatever you prefer, and also watch my videos weeks and sometimes even months before everyone else. And most importantly, take care.